Welcome to Vlieseline UK. I'm Laura Strutch from Made Peachy, and this tutorial is going to show you how to create a drawstring bag with bunny ears. This is a quick and easy project, and the cute bunny ears make this an ideal project for Easter gifts and party favours. This project uses Vlieseline B700, which is a woven fusible interfacing with 100% biodegradable adhesives. Let's take a look at the products and supplies to create the drawstring bag. So we have print and plain cotton, and this will become the lining and the main fabric of the bag. And we have some coordinating ribbon here, and this is going to become the drawstring ties. I have a rotary cutter, ruler and mat, and these are for cutting and preparing all of my fabrics and interlinings. And again, here's some pinking shears. The interfacing I'm going to use for this project is the Vlieseline B700, and this is a woven fusible interfacing. Now, this interfacing is made with 100% biodegradable adhesive, so it's a lovely eco product. Because we're working with an iron-on interfacing, we're going to be using the Vlieseline iron-on cloth, which is ideal for both protecting the fabrics and the interfacing that you're working with and the base plate of the iron. From the print cotton, which is the main fabric and will be the outer part of the drawstring bag, I've cut two pieces and they measure 6.5 inches by 8 inches. And also we have the lining fabric, which measures 6.5 inches by 8 inches. I've also cut two pieces of lining fabric, and these will form the channels that will run across the bag, and they will house the drawstrings. And these measure 2 inches by 5.5 inches, and we've created two of those. Again, using the rotary cutter, ruler and mat, I've prepared some of the B700 interfacing. So we've created two pieces that will be used for the channels. So these are cut to 2 inches by 5.5 inches. And we've also got two pieces that will be fused onto the main bag. So these, again, two pieces, and they measure 6.5 inches by 8 inches. Working with these fabric sections that will make the drawstring channels, I've placed these wrong sides uppermost, and I'm going to position on top the B700. So I'm going to make sure that covers the piece entirely. And I'm also just going to take some time just to double check that the adhesive, so the slightly rougher side, is in contact with the fabric and not pointing uppermost. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to use my Vlieseline iron-on cloth. Now you can see this is nice and soft, so I've dampened this and I'm going to place it on top to cover the work. And because it's transparent, I can see if I've caused any of the interlining to shuffle or move as I've placed that on. So that's covered. To fuse B700 onto the wrong side of the fabric, we're going to be using a medium heat. So we're 2 to 3 dots on the iron, and we're going to use the press and hold technique. So I'm going to place the iron on. I'm going to press it, I'm going to leave it for around about 15 seconds, and then I'm going to lift it and I'm going to move the iron and press again. So I'm pressing and holding and working all the way across. Once that's been fused, I can carefully remove the iron-on cloth, and I'm going to place both of these fused parts onto the table for 30 minutes to allow them to cool fully, and that will let the adhesive securely bond the interlining onto the wrong side of the fabric. I'm going to repeat the process here with the outer fabric, the main fabric of the drawstring bag. So we have this wrong side uppermost, and on top of that I'm going to position the B700. Again, I'm just going to take time just to double check that the adhesive side is facing the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure that's in position. And again, I'm going to cover the whole project with the Vlieseline iron-on cloth, and this has been dampened fully so I can see exactly where I'm pressing. I'm using a medium heat iron, and I'm using a press and hold technique. So I'm pressing the iron onto the interlining and I'm holding it for approximately 15 seconds, lifting, repositioning and pressing again. And what this means is that the iron is just transferring the heat straight down, whereas if I was working in a sweeping motion like I was ironing, it might cause everything to shift and move around. So once that's been fully pressed, I can remove carefully the Vlieseline iron-on cloth, and I can see that the B700 has been bonded fully to the back of the main fabric. So I'm going to pop that aside and I'm going to leave that on a cool surface for 30 minutes, and that will allow the fabric and the adhesive to cool and fully bond together. And I'm going to repeat the process with the remaining main fabric. Whilst the interfacing is cooling for both the main fabric and the channels, I'm going to use the template to carefully cut out the ears for the bunny. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces from the print cotton, and I'm going to repeat the process and cut 2 pieces from the plain cotton. Using the template, I've cut 2 pieces from the main fabric for the ears and 2 from the lining, and I've also cut 2 from the Vlieseline B700. So we're going to work with the main fabric, and I'm going to turn these so that they're wrong sides uppermost. And on top of that, I'm going to place the B700. Again, I'm positioning it so that the adhesive side is facing the wrong side of the fabric. Pop that into place. The B700 is in place, and I'm going to cover with the Vlieseline iron cloth. So this has been dampened, and this will ensure that I can see the project underneath and also create some steam for nice even heat transfer. I'm working with 2 to 3 dot heat on the iron, and I'm going to press and hold and fuse the interfacing onto the wrong side of the main fabric. So once they've been fused into place, I'm going to pop them aside for 30 minutes on a flat surface to allow them to cool fully. The channels for the drawstrings are folded and secured onto the front of the outer fabric of the bag. So to create the channel, we're going to begin by folding in a small portion at each end along the short end and just pressing in place. Repeating on the second side. And once the ends have been pressed in place, I'm going to fold it in half, aligning the 2 raw edges along the top, and just run a quick press over, and this is going to give me a guideline for folding in the raw edges. So this I'm going to press nice and firmly before turning round and folding again the raw edges in towards that centre fold. So once this is all pressed, we're going to have a channel that can be stitched to the bag front, and all of the raw edges are concealed. The channel for the drawstring needs to be secured onto the outer fabric of the bag, so I'm going to pin it in place and then take it to the sewing machine and stitch 2 lines of stitching across the top and the bottom. So to get the really neat placement, I'm first of all going to fold the panel in half, just mark a little crease down the centre, and I'm going to take the channel and I'm going to repeat the process. So I'm going to fold it in half just to create a crease. So I'm going to line up the crease on the channel with the crease on the main fabric, and using a ruler I want it positioned around about 2 inches from the upper edge. So I'm going to use the ruler just to double check the placement, and then I can pin in place. So heading over to the sewing machine now with the 2 outer sections of the drawstring bag, and we're going to sew a line of straight machine stitching all the way across the upper line and all the way across this lower line here to secure the channel. Once both of the channels for the drawstrings have been stitched in place, we can set those aside with the lining pieces and return to the ears. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sewing these 2 together. So we've got the main fabric that's been interfaced on the wrong side and the lining, and we're going to place those right sides together and just hold in place with a pin. Over at the sewing machine, we're going to work a line of straight stitching all the way up to the point of the ear and returning to this base edge of the ear. We're not going to stitch across the bottom. We're going to leave this section open to allow us to turn the whole piece through. I'm going to work with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around on both of the bunny ear pieces. So now that the bunny ear is stitched neatly all the way around the edge, we need to trim into this seam allowance. So you can work with a pair of sharp scissors and just make small clips all around this curved section, and that's going to make it nice and neat once it's turned through. Or you can opt for a pair of pinking shears and carefully work all the way around the curve just cutting off the excess seam allowance and just pinking those edges. So I'm being really careful to avoid the stitches whilst trimming into that seam allowance, and that's going to make really neat curves when it's turned through. So working through that gap that we've left, I'm going to just draw all of the bunny ears through to the right side and using a small knitting needle or poking tool just to press those seams right out along that curve. So you can roll the seams between your fingers just to get a really neat laying of those seams, and repeat for the second ear. So working through that gap that we've left, I'm going to just draw all of the bunny ears through to the right side and using a small knitting needle or poking tool just to press those seams right out along that curve. So you can roll the seams between your fingers just to get a really neat laying of those seams, and repeat for the second ear. So using something like a poking tool or a knitting needle just lets you push out all of those curves and points on the ears, get them really nice and neat. I'm just rolling the seams between my finger and thumb just to get them stacked very neatly on top and align the seam allowance underneath. And I'm just going to take my iron and carefully just press over each of the ears in turn. And they're ready to be secured onto the bag. So the ears are going to be secured onto the bag by sandwiching them between the outer fabric and the lining, and then once it's turned through, they're going to stand prominent above the project. So I'm going to start by placing the main fabric of the bag with the right sides uppermost, and onto that I'm going to position the two bunny ears. So I'm matching the main fabric to the main fabric so that that is facing. And on top of that, I'm going to place the lining fabric. So that is sandwiching the bunny ears in between the two layers. And you can use clips or pins just to secure that in place. I'm going to pop a couple of pins there to secure everything in place. And I'm going to take it across to the sewing machine and work a line of straight stitching all the way across. And that's going to join the lining and the main fabric, and it's going to secure the bunny ears into position. The line of stitching has been worked all the way across. I'll slip these pins out. And we can see here that the lining and the main fabric have been joined and the bunny ears are secured inside. So I'm carefully going to just press all the seam allowances down to the lining, and I can set that portion aside and complete the second side. So in the same manner, I'm going to place the outer portion of the bag and the lining with the right sides together. I'm simply going to pop a couple of pins in here. I'm going to head over to the sewing machine, and with a line of straight stitching, I'm going to work all the way across this upper section to join the lining and the main fabric together. So the next stage is joining these two portions of the drawstring bag together, and I'm going to do that by placing each half together with right sides facing. So I'm going to carefully align these seams. So I'm going to make sure where this seam here joins this seam here, I'm going to stack them very, very neatly and pin or clip that in place. And I'm going to double check it on the other side as well, just to be sure that they're absolutely aligned. And then I'm just going to secure all the way around with pins or clips. Once the two portions of the drawstring bag have been pinned or clipped in place, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to work around to join the elements together. So I'm going to work around using a 1/4 inch seam, pivoting on the corners all the way around to join the layers. When I work across this base edge of the lining, I'm going to leave a portion of this unstitched. Now you can use a couple of clips or pins as a reminder as to what section you need to leave unstitched. This is very important because this is the section where you're going to be turning the whole bag through to the right side. So now we've joined the bag and the lining pieces together. We've worked the whole way around using a 1/4 inch seam. and there is a gap left here in the lining for turning through. So before I do turn it through, I'm just going to use some sharp scissors and I'm going to snip away the bulk that lies in the corners of the seam allowance, and that's just going to make it really neat when it's turned through. Being really careful not to cut into the stitches. Small tiny snips just to remove the bulk. Now we're ready to turn everything through to the right side. So using the small gap in the seam allowance, I'm going to just carefully roll right down and grab one of the lower corners of the bag and just carefully pull it through. So just carefully drawing everything through. There come the bunny ears, and then return the lining through to the right side. So just carefully running the tip of the knitting needle or pokey tool along those seams just to push everything out neatly, and continuing and repeating it right up into the lining as well. And everything through to the right side. But before I go any further, I'm just going to grab the iron and just carefully give everything a nice press. I'm going to press in the seam allowance along that gap. Now before I return the lining to the inside, I'm either going to hand stitch or use the machine just to seal up that gap in the seam allowance. So now we need to return the lining inside the bag, and to do that I'm just going to carefully pull open the bag and just push all of the lining right inside. Now I want to have this seam laying very neatly across the top, so I'm just going to finger press and roll those seams until the seam runs directly along the top. You can of course go in with the iron and just carefully give it a press, and that makes the finish really neat on that upper seam. So now the lining is fully pushed into the bag, I'm just going to give everything one last press before I grab my ribbon ties and pass them through the channel to make the drawstrings. So the way I'm working my drawstrings is I've got 2 ribbons, and I'm going to pass one ribbon through the channel in one direction and then turning over and through the second channel, and I'm going to knot it on the side, and then I'm going to repeat the process so I can tie the other ribbon in the other orientation. So I'm going to you can use a bodkin or a pokey tool just to take the ribbon and just guide it all the way through the ribbon channel. And once it's out the other side, I'm going to turn the bag over. I'm going to just take the other end of the ribbon, and I'm going to carefully lead it all the way through and out the other side. And what I'm going to do, turning it over, I'm going to repeat the process, and I'm going to feed this ribbon in the other direction through the front from right to left, and I'm going to bring that around to the back of the work, making sure I'm pulling on the correct ribbon end. And I'm going to do the exact same thing using a pokey tool just to carefully ease the ribbon all the way through the channel. And now we have 2 drawstrings. Once you've fitted the drawstrings, just tie knots in the ends so that you've got enough room to draw them up and also open the bag fully, and you can trim the ribbon neatly if you like. And now your drawstring bags are ready to fill with treats or gifts, and they're reusable year after year. Thanks so much for joining me to create these drawstring bunny bags. I hope you enjoyed this project. You can find out more about Vlieseline online at vlieseline.com, and you can find us on social media at Vlieseline UK.